So this is a bigger question. And
you mean the other ones weren't?
No. The other ones were about kind of electoral politics and the competition of ideas. This is more, it's a different question that you alluded to previously, is that some people believe that we've defaulted into a culture of electoralism, which is an academic distinction between that and democracy, and kind of real bottom-up grassroots democracy. Because as we know, the transition in 1994 was brought about by mass action, big organized formations sustaining pressure on power for a long time. So there wasn't an election to decide that the transition should occur, as you know. And some people are arguing that the solution to our current set of challenges, whatever they may be, economic, state or societal, needs to be brought about outside of the electoral system. So that we need a Codesa or a big organized formation that's really built up of people and groups who have similar goals, but fall across party lines and so forth. Do you think that's realistic? Do you think that we can solve these problems through a change of government, as you say? Or do we need to look at very, very different alternatives, like Codesas? And if we need to look at alternatives, what do you think should be the role of young people and citizens in bringing about that change beyond voting itself?
I think before we even arrive at that space, we must be able to deal better with the space that we're at. My biggest fear is, as a politician, I'm often amazed at how people let politicians get away with things. I am amazed at how South Africans, in the Act of 94, suspended their own autonomy, suspended their own authority, and directed it to leaders and said, we give everything to you. Now, to give everything to politicians is a crime. And I think what's starting to happen now is that we're seeing a greater dearth of civil society participant. Institutions such as the church and faith-based bodies are starting to lessen their voice towards government because we have government hostility towards it. I think even if I think about organizations like the Treatment Action Campaign and many others of those, I'm seeing less and less of their voice coming on board. And part of why Citizens for Marikana was such a powerful thing was that it was a combination of politicians, but not as political parties, as citizens, and South Africans on board, because that's a move that must be in place. And now, the work that even Dalimpofu did in terms of the mining scenario in Marikana, that's citizens participating and holding the government to account. So I think what we desperately need is better accountability. I make it quite a crystal clear thing, and young people must be key to this issue, is that we mustn't allow this increasing distance between politicians and civil society to then be entrenched. Civil society are the bosses, politicians are the workers. It seems as though we've got it the other way around. And that has resulted in certain constitutional problems, even at local government. Give you an example. An IDP. Why are young people not finding out what happens in the IDP? What happens in their ward? What do they want from local government? Why are they holding that pressure? So what happens is consultants and a few other people eventually write these IDPs that suit politicians, that don't suit communities. If we must be sincere about democratic participation, we must strengthen civil society. We must make sure that constitutionally given processes must actually then be enacted upon, and you must distance politicians who don't follow those things. If people break the laws, if they break the rules, if they don't consult with the community, they must be removed. So I think for a process of Codesa to work, it can only take leadership. It can only take a particular type of leadership. And you can recall even our first Codesa was very well led, actually, funny enough. You had the icons such as Nelson Mandela who were then able, with a certain level. And in fact, funny enough, Mandela tapped into business more than he did into government, for that matter. He extracted resources out of there. But that is the magnanimity of the leader that he is. What we need now is, and I know we can't all point all problems to leadership, but I think what we desperately have to come on board is that those institutions of civil society must then be able to stand up and be able to hold government to account. and be able to direct a conversation. My other fear is that the silencing of those institutions has really come upon the numbing down of unions in terms of what unions are supposed to be doing. All unions are doing now is support entities for alliances. And I think if we really take a sober look at our history, we can recall the fact that the only organized structure for black South Africans were unions. And those unions, pre-94, played a very critical role, even though they weren't formal political parties, in making sure the rights of citizens were maintained. Now, we've got to be able to say, if there's integrity to what unions must do today, they must be able to not, in fact, when it suits them, be the voice of government, and when it doesn't suit them, because that's a civil society institution that has classically failed even its own membership base and broadly the issues of workers. So I don't take seriously when unions stand up and now say we want the rights of workers and then go and stand at Luthuli House and support a policy position that distances himself. I find that disingenuous. So it can't, it's the same if you co-opted the church or any faith-based institutions where suddenly they were part of your alliance and when it suited them, they wanted to stand up on other issues. Civil society must be strengthened, as we've seen the strengthening of the media, as we can then be able to say, let those legs of society come together so that we can have a frank conversation about what sort of world we do. And that will take government leadership and leadership at its best that can be able to articulate that. It's certainly a dream I hold on to.
Kind of a final question, or final issue to get your thinking on is patriarchy. Now we know that this is a well-acknowledged issue. Mandela was at pains to emphasize the effect it has on our society, its implications on cultures, traditions, and also then how the state functions and how political parties function, how the church functions, and gender in particular. So the ANC, as we know, has a gender parity policy, where they endeavor to, via quota, keep balance. What are your views on this particular challenge? And then also, as if elected, how would you go about championing this particular cause?
I certainly don't think quotas are the answer to this issue. I find quotas, in the end of the day, disempower women. They create a synthetic world where you can hit a 50-50%. And it would be the same as if we took the Springbok side and said for it to be able to be a functional entity, we must employ a quota system there to make sure that the Springboks represent the broader societal features. You might achieve that, but your biggest challenge is that then the Springboks don't win. And I've found, every so often, no disrespect to women, is that I've often found in the name of the same policy that we appoint certain people who don't have the competence to do the job. My sense is that the issue of patriarchy is not just unique to South Africa. It's an African problem. One of the ways we can really address it, and I believe that in many ways, even if you think about the issue of leadership, I think the DA has been able to achieve leadership and woman leadership without the superimposed parity